You know, right now, in this very moment, there's something weighing on your heart. There's something that's been keeping you up at night. There's a situation in your life that feels unbearable, and you've been carrying it around like a heavy stone, trying to figure it out, trying to control it, trying to make it turn out the way you think it should. And I want to tell you something that might just change everything for you today. It's time to put that burden down. It's time to leave it in God's hands. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but I've tried everything. I've prayed, I've hoped, I've worked so hard, and nothing's changed. And that's exactly the point. You've been trying to do it all yourself. You've been holding on so tight to your problems, to your pain, to your circumstances, that you've forgotten something fundamental about how this universe works. You've forgotten that there's a power greater than you, a wisdom far beyond your limited perspective, and an intelligence that orchestrates everything in perfect timing. When you're in pain, when you're hurting, when you're going through something that feels like it's tearing you apart, it's the most natural thing in the world to try to fix it yourself. We're conditioned to believe that we have to control everything, that we have to have all the answers, that if we just work hard enough, or think hard enough, or worry hard enough, we can somehow force life to bend to our will. But let me tell you something that's going to set you free. You were never meant to carry these burdens alone. You were never designed to figure everything out by yourself. And the moment you truly understand this, the moment you really let it sink into your consciousness, everything shifts. God sees your pain. Every tear you've cried in the darkness, every moment you felt alone, every time your heart has broken into what feels like a million pieces, none of it has gone unnoticed. None of it has been ignored. The divine presence that created you, that breathed life into you, that knows every single hair on your head, sees everything you're going through. And not only does God see your pain, but God hears your cry. Every prayer, every desperate plea, every whispered help me in the middle of the night when you couldn't sleep, every single one has been heard. But here's where most people get stuck. They think that because they've prayed and things haven't changed yet, that God isn't listening. They think that because they're still in pain, still in the struggle, still in the darkness, that somehow they've been abandoned. And this couldn't be further from the truth. You see, God's timing is not your timing. God's ways are not your ways. And what you're perceiving as silence is actually the universe rearranging itself on your behalf. Think about it this way. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every single day to check if it's growing. You don't stand over it and worry and stress and try to force it to sprout faster. You plant it, you water it, you give it sunlight, and then you trust. You trust the process. You trust that beneath the surface, in the darkness of the soil, something miraculous is happening. The seed is breaking open, roots are forming, life is preparing to burst forth. But all of this happens in a time frame that the seed knows, not in the time frame you demand. Your life works the same way. The challenges you're facing right now, the pain you're experiencing, the situations that seem impossible, they're all seeds that have been planted. And yes, it's dark right now. Yes, it feels like nothing is happening. Yes, it seems like your prayers are falling on deaf ears. But I promise you, beneath the surface of what you can see, God is working. The universe is conspiring on your behalf. Things are shifting and changing and moving in ways that you cannot perceive with your limited human perspective. The problem is, we want instant results. We want our pain to disappear overnight. We want our problems solved immediately. We want what we want, and we want it now. And when it doesn't happen according to our schedule, we lose faith. We start to doubt. We begin to think that we're doing something wrong, or that we're not worthy, or that God has forgotten about us. But this is where we need to shift our understanding completely. Leaving it in God's hands doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. It doesn't mean being passive or giving up or resigning yourself to misery. What it means is doing what you can do, taking the actions that are yours to take, and then releasing your attachment to the outcome. It means understanding that you're not the one in control of how things unfold. You're not the director of this movie. You're not the author who gets to write every single plot twist. You're a participant in a much larger story, and there's a wisdom guiding that story that's far greater than anything you could comprehend. When you truly leave something in God's hands, you're acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. You're admitting that your perspective is limited. You're recognizing that what you think you want might not actually be what's best for you. And this takes tremendous courage. It takes tremendous faith, because it means letting go of control. And for most of us, that's the scariest thing in the world. But here's what happens when you really do this. When you really surrender your burdens, when you really trust that God has got this, when you really believe that the universe is working for you and not against you, a weight lifts. The anxiety that's been crushing your chest starts to ease. The fear that's been keeping you paralyzed begins to fade. And in its place comes a peace that surpasses all understanding. Not because your circumstances have changed yet, but because your relationship to those circumstances has transformed. You stop waking up every morning with that immediate rush of dread. You stop going to bed every night with your mind racing through all the worst-case scenarios. You stop carrying that tension in your shoulders, that knot in your stomach, that heaviness in your heart, because you finally understood that this isn't all on you. You finally realized that you don't have to have all the figured out. You finally accepted that it's okay to not be in control. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop trying to control everything, the moment you surrender to the flow of life, the moment you trust in something greater than yourself, that's when things actually start to shift. That's when solutions appear that you never could have thought of. That's when doors open that you didn't even know existed. That's when people show up in your life who bring exactly what you need. That's when circumstances align in ways that seem almost miraculous. But you have to understand something important. God's plan for you might not look like your plan for you. The way your life unfolds might not match the picture you had in your mind. And this is actually a blessing, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. Because your limited perspective can only see what you think you want based on your past experiences, your conditioning, your fears, and your ego's desires. But God sees the bigger picture. God knows what you actually need to grow, to evolve, to become the person you're meant to be. Sometimes what looks like a rejection is actually protection. Sometimes what feels like a delay is actually divine timing. Sometimes what seems like a door closing is actually the universe redirecting you to something better. But you can't see this when you're in the middle of the pain. You can't understand it when you're in the thick of the struggle. You can only see it when you look back, when you're on the other side, when you realize that everything happened exactly as it needed to happen. I know you're hurting right now. I know you're tired. I know you've been strong for so long and you just want this to be over. I know you've been praying and hoping and doing everything you know how to do, and you're exhausted. And I want you to know that it's okay to be tired. It's okay to feel weak. It's okay to admit that you can't do this alone. Because that admission, that vulnerability, that honest acknowledgement of your limitations, that's not weakness. That's actually the beginning of true strength. True strength isn't about never breaking. It's not about always being in control. It's not about having all the answers or never showing your pain. True strength is about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. It's about doing your part and then trusting God to do the rest. It's about being willing to walk through the darkness with faith, even when you can't see where you're going. And faith, real faith, isn't about being certain of the outcome. It's not about knowing exactly how things are going to turn out. Real faith is about trusting the process even when you can't see the result. It's about believing that you're being guided even when the path is unclear. It's about knowing that you're being held even when you feel like you're falling. You see, God hears your cry not just as sound, but as the deepest longing of your soul. And the response isn't always what you expect. Sometimes the answer to your prayer isn't getting what you asked for. Sometimes the answer is getting what you need. Sometimes the answer is developing the strength to handle whatever comes. Sometimes the answer is learning to find peace regardless of your circumstances. Sometimes the answer is becoming a different person, someone who no longer needs the situation to change in order to be okay. This is the transformation that happens when you truly leave it in God's hands. You stop being controlled by your circumstances. You stop letting external conditions determine your internal state. You start to understand that peace isn't something you find when everything works out the way you want. Peace is something you cultivate from within, regardless of what's happening around you. And I want to be clear about something. Leaving it in God's hands doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become cold or detached or indifferent. It means you care deeply, you give it your all, you do everything that's genuinely yours to do, and then you release the outcome. You trust that whatever happens, even if it's not what you wanted, even if it's not what you expected, it's what's needed for your highest good and your greatest growth. Think about the times in your life when things didn't work out the way you planned. Think about the times when you were devastated because something you wanted so badly didn't happen, or something you loved so much was taken away. Now look at where you are today. Can you see how those moments, as painful as they were, led you to something better? Can you see how those closed doors eventually led you to open windows? Can you see how what felt like the worst thing that could happen actually became a turning point? This is the pattern of how life works when you're aligned with the divine flow. This is what happens when you trust in something greater than yourself. This is the evidence that God is always working on your behalf, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when you can't see it, even when you want to give up. Your pain is not permanent. Your struggle is not your identity. Your current circumstances are not your final destination. They're just a chapter in your story, and the author of your story is writing something far more beautiful than you could write for yourself. But you have to let the story unfold. You have to stop trying to skip ahead to the end. You have to stop trying to rewrite every scene that doesn't match your expectations. When you're going through difficult times, it's easy to forget who you really are. It's easy to get so consumed by the problem that you lose sight of your own divine nature. But you are not your problems. You are not your pain. You are not your circumstances. You are a spiritual being having a human experience, and that spiritual essence within you is connected to the same power that created galaxies and orchestrates the perfect harmony of nature. That means you have access to infinite wisdom. You have access to unlimited strength. You have access to a peace that exists beyond all understanding. But you can only access these things when you get out of your own way. You can only tap into this power when you stop trying to do everything yourself. You can only experience this peace when you surrender your need to control. And surrender is not defeat. Let me say that again because this is so important. Surrender is not giving up. Surrender is not admitting failure. Surrender is acknowledging that there's a greater intelligence at work and you're choosing to align with it rather than fight against it. Surrender is the ultimate act of faith. It's saying, I trust that I'm being taken care of even when I can't see how. I trust that everything is working out for my highest good, even when it doesn't look like it. I trust that God has got this even when I feel lost. This trust, this faith, this willingness to surrender, it changes everything. It changes your energy. It changes how you show up in the world. It changes what you attract into your life. Because when you're not desperately clinging and grasping and forcing and controlling, you create space for miracles to happen. You create an opening for grace to flow in. You become a vessel through which the divine can work. And God is always trying to work through you. God is always trying to guide you. God is always trying to show you the way. But if you're too busy running around in fear and panic and anxiety, if you're too caught up in your own limited thinking and your own desperate attempts to fix everything, you can't hear the guidance. You can't see the signs. You can't feel the nudges that are trying to point you in the right direction. Leaving it in God's hands creates the stillness necessary to receive divine guidance. It creates the calm necessary to hear the whispers of intuition. It creates the clarity necessary to see the path that's being illuminated for you. And when you start to see these things, when you start to notice the synchronicities and the small miracles and the perfect timing of events, your faith deepens. Your trust strengthens. Your peace expands. You start to realize that you're never alone. You start to understand that you're always supported. You start to recognize that even in your darkest moments, even when you felt abandoned, even when you thought no one could possibly understand what you were going through, God was there. God was holding you. God was carrying you through. And those prayers you thought weren't being answered, they were being answered all along, just not in the way you expected. Not in the timing you demanded, not in the form you thought you needed, but in the way that was actually best for you, in the timing that was actually perfect for your growth, in the form that was actually aligned with your highest good. Every single thing you've been through has been preparing you for something. Every challenge has been teaching you something. Every hardship has been strengthening you in some way. And I know it's hard to see this when you're in the middle of the storm. I know it's difficult to believe this when you're drowning in pain, but it's true nonetheless. Your struggles are not punishments. Your difficulties are not evidence that you've done something wrong or that you're not worthy or that God has turned away from you. They're invitations to grow. They're opportunities to develop faith. They're chances to discover strength you didn't know you had. They're doorways to a deeper understanding of yourself and your connection to the recite, divine. And when you can shift your perspective to see your challenges this way, when you can reframe your pain as a catalyst for transformation, when you can view your struggles as sacred assignments rather than cruel punishments, everything changes. The same circumstances that were making you bitter start making you better. The same situations that were filling you with resentment start filling you with resilience. The same experiences that were breaking you down start building you up. This is the alchemy that happens when you truly leave it in God's hands. This is the magic that occurs when you surrender your burdens and trust the process. You don't become someone who never has problems. You become someone who handles problems differently. You don't become someone who never feels pain. You become someone who moves through pain with more grace. You don't become someone who never struggles. You become someone who struggles with faith instead of fear. And faith isn't the absence of doubt. Faith isn't pretending everything is fine when it's not. Faith isn't forcing yourself to smile when you want to cry. Real faith is being honest about where you are while still trusting where you're going. Real faith is acknowledging the difficulty while still believing in the possibility. Real faith is feeling the pain while still holding on to hope. Hope is not naive optimism. Hope is not denying reality. Hope is a spiritual practice. It's a choice you make every single day to believe that things can get better, even when you have no evidence. It's a decision to keep going, even when you're exhausted. It's a commitment to trust, even when you're scared. And every time you choose hope over despair, every time you choose faith over fear, every time you choose to trust God instead of trying to control everything yourself, you're building your spiritual strength. You're deepening your connection to the divine. You're becoming more aligned with your true nature. And this alignment is what ultimately brings the peace you're seeking. Because peace was never meant to come from having a perfect life. Peace was never meant to come from having all your problems solved. Peace was never meant to come from getting everything you want exactly when you want it. Peace comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. Peace comes from trusting that you're being guided. Peace comes from believing that God has got you, and God does have you. Right now, in this moment, regardless of what you're going through, regardless of how bad things look, regardless of how much pain you're in, God has you. You are held, you are loved, you are supported, you are not alone. You have never been alone. You will never be alone. The divine presence that breathed life into you at the beginning is with you now and will be with you always. This presence knows your name. This presence feels your pain. This presence hears your cry. And this presence is working on your behalf in ways you cannot see, in dimensions you cannot perceive, through means you cannot understand. Your job is not to figure it all out. Your job is not to make it all happen. Your job is not to force and push and control. Your job is to show up. Your job is to do the next right thing. Your job is to take one step at a time. And then your job is to trust, to have faith, to leave it in God's hands. When you do this, when you really do this, you'll start to notice things. You'll start to see how you're being guided. You'll start to recognize how doors are opening at exactly the right time. You'll start to realize how people are showing up with exactly what you need. You'll start to understand how everything is connected, how everything is orchestrated, how nothing is random. You'll look back at the times you thought you were lost, and you'll see that you were actually being redirected. You'll look back at the times you thought you were broken, and you'll see that you were actually being rebuilt into something stronger. You'll look back at the times you thought God wasn't listening, and you'll see that you were being heard all along. This is the perspective that comes with time and faith. This is the wisdom that comes from trusting the process. This is the peace that comes from leaving it in God's hands. And it's available to you right now. Not someday when everything works out. Not eventually when all your problems are solved. Right now, exactly as you are. Exactly where you are. You don't have to wait until you're perfect to trust God. You don't have to wait until you have it all figured out to have faith. You don't have to wait until your life looks a certain way to surrender your burdens. You can do it now. You can do it right in the middle of your mess. You can do it while you're still hurting, while you're still struggling, while you're still scared. In fact, that's the best time to do it. When you're at the end of your rope, when you've tried everything else, when you have nowhere else to turn, that's when surrender becomes real. That's when faith becomes genuine. That's when trust becomes transformative. So if you're there right now, if you're at that place where you can't carry this anymore, if you're at that point where you need help, if you're at that moment where you're ready to let go, I want you to know that this is not a sign of weakness. This is a sign of wisdom. This is not giving up. This is waking up. This is not failure. This is faith. Take whatever burden you've been carrying and mentally place it in God's hands. See yourself physically taking this weight off your shoulders and giving it over to a power greater than yourself. Feel the relief that comes with releasing control. Feel the peace that flows in when you stop resisting. Feel the love that surrounds you when you remember you're not alone. And then, after you've surrendered it, after you've released it, after you've left it in God's hands, let it stay there. Don't pick it back up 5 minutes later. Don't take it back because you're nervous about how things will turn out. Don't grab onto it again because you think you know better. Let it go. Really let it go. Trust that it's being handled. Trust that it's being worked out. Trust that God's got this. This doesn't mean you'll never think about it again. It doesn't mean you'll never feel concerned. It doesn't mean you become completely detached. It means that when the worry comes back, when the fear creeps in, when the anxiety starts to rise, you notice it, you acknowledge it, and then you consciously choose to release it again. You say, no, I already gave this to God. I'm trusting the process. I'm having faith. And you do this as many times as necessary. This is the practice. This is the spiritual work. This is how you build your faith muscles and strengthen your trust and deepen your connection to the divine. Every time you catch yourself trying to take back control and you consciously choose to surrender again, you're growing. You're evolving. You're becoming more aligned with your true spiritual nature. This is not always easy. Some days it will feel natural and peaceful. Other days it will feel impossible and you'll struggle. And that's okay. That's part of being human. What matters is that you keep coming back to it. You keep choosing faith. You keep trusting. You keep leaving it in God's hands. And over time, something beautiful happens. The peace that felt temporary starts to feel more permanent. The trust that felt shaky starts to feel more solid. The faith that felt weak starts to feel stronger. And you realize that you're changing. Not because your circumstances have necessarily changed, but because you have changed. Your relationship with life has changed. Your understanding of how the universe works has changed. Your connection to God has changed. You're no longer someone who falls apart at every obstacle. You're no longer someone who's controlled by fear. You're no longer someone who thinks they have to do everything alone. You've become someone who knows how to surrender. You've become someone who understands the power of faith. You've become someone who trusts that they're always being guided and supported by something greater than themselves. This transformation is what's waiting for you on the other side of surrender. This peace is what's available when you truly leave it in God's hands. This strength is what you discover when you stop trying to be strong all by yourself, and instead allow yourself to be strengthened by divine power. So let go, release your grip, open your hands, stop fighting so hard, stop trying to control what you cannot control, stop carrying burdens you were never meant to carry alone, put them down, hand them over. Leave them in God's hands. Trust that you are seen, trust that you are heard, trust that you are loved, trust that you are guided, trust that everything is working out for your highest good, even if you can't see how yet. Trust that your prayers are being answered, even if not in the way you expected. Trust that your pain has purpose, even if you don't understand it yet. And most of all, trust that you are not alone. You have never been alone. In your darkest moments, in your deepest pain, in your greatest struggles, God has been there. God has seen every tear. God has heard every cry. God has felt every heartbreak. And God is working on your behalf right now, in this very moment, arranging circumstances, aligning opportunities, preparing blessings that you cannot yet imagine. Your job is simply to trust, to have faith, to keep going, to take one step at a time, and to leave the rest in God's hands. Do this, and you will find peace. Do this, and you will find strength. Do this, and you will find that you're capable of handling whatever life brings your way. Not because you're doing it alone, but because you finally understood that you never had to. You were always meant to walk this path hand in hand with the divine, supported by infinite love, guided by infinite wisdom, held by infinite grace. Leave it in God's hands and watch what happens. Watch how things shift. Watch how doors open. Watch how solutions appear. Watch how your burden lifts. Watch how your peace deepens. Watch how your faith grows. Watch how your life transforms. Not always in the ways you expect, but always in the ways you need. Always at the perfect time. Always for your highest good. Always with love. Always with purpose. Always with grace. This is the promise. This is the truth. This is the way. Leave it in God's hands and trust that you are being taken care of, because you are. Right now, always, forever.